Okay, so the usual warning about this one. Much of this will be subject to change. Some of it won't. We don't know what's subject to change and what is not. Remember, beta isn't even out yet. So, what do we know about artifacts so far? Well, there is a given artifact for every spec in the game, and each one has its own short quest chain to acquire it as soon as Legion launches. You'll get your artifact before going to the Broken Isle. Now, given that we don't go to any new zones to get our artifact, maybe we'll get to acquire our artifacts in the pre-expansion patch. Usually comes out a month before the new expansion. I doubt it, however. They have already announced what's going to be in the pre-expansion patch, and it isn't this. But we can hope. So, the artifact. It's a vehicle to another talent tree of sorts. You gather artifact power in the game to make your weapon more powerful and unlock traits. There are traits of varying levels of power, and you unlock a major trait very early on. After that, you have a choice of paths to take for the next minor trait, and so on. It was said that it'll take months to fully unlock all traits. Now, whether that means for the average player, or that there's a weekly artifact power cap that means everyone will take months, I don't know. There should be a cap. As they said, we get to choose how we want to acquire our artifact power, and that choice wouldn't exist if you could just do everything and get more. Now, ordinarily, I wouldn't doubt at all that there'll be a weekly cap. It's obvious. However, given that they're dispensing with a weekly cap for the upcoming Valor points in patch 6.2.3, means that I do have that small niggling doubt in the back of my head. Hopefully this is a totally different situation, though. Now, all of the artifacts, along with a short piece of background lore, are now available to view on the website. With artifacts, choice of weapon has been removed. Now, for serious raiders, this will be less of an issue because you never really had much choice anyway. You went for whichever weapon was best, or the best that you could obtain, rather than any personal preference. However, for most players, you could choose the weapon that suited your sense of style. This choice has now been removed from everyone. You can transmog the artifact, but you can't transmog a dagger to look like a staff, of course. There are limits. Now, an example of this is Shadow Priests, who would prefer to use a staff, are plumb out of luck, because your artifact is a dagger in offhand. And people have already started complaining about this. Now, I'm sure Blizzard would have foreseen that and decided that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. This is definitely something that will not change now. This is written in stone. But it is getting people's backs up already. Now, at level cap, we get a quest line that allows us to upgrade our artifacts with a relic slot and another skin. We know limited details of relics at the moment, and these are the main things that could easily change, but they seem to be the device that gives the weapon its item level type power. For example, just as with the rest of your gear, you would expect top PvPers and mythic raiders to have the best quality gear in the game, so this is presumably how you access the most powerful relics. Now, the artifact will have different models and recolours available, which you access by completing content such as quest chains. Some of these will be obtainable from quest chains in the various zones as you level up. More will be released with future patches as the expansion rumbles on. By the end of it, we should have a very large number of models for our artifacts. Okay, so on to some specifics. Let's talk about some truly legendary weapons in Warcraft. Gorehowl, Frostmourne, Atish, Doomhammer, and at the top of the tree, arguably the most lore-heavy weapon of all time in the game, the Ashbringer. Now, from that list, only Doomhammer and the Ashbringer are included in the list of artifacts, and there has been a fairly reasonable criticism of the inclusion of this super powerful weapon. Now, in vanilla, there was frequent mention of the Ashbringer throughout the game. You even had players fishing for it. A rumour had gone around that this is how you could obtain it. This culminated in the corrupted Ashbringer becoming a drop in Naxxramas. It even had a scripted event attached to it in Scarlet Monastery for the lucky wielders. The next part of the story was played out in Wrath of the Lich King, as the Death Knight starter quest saw Tyrion cleanse the Ashbringer and wield it against the Lich King himself. In Burning Crusade, You saw the cleansing of the corrupted shard that formed the heart of the sword in Old Hillsbrad. So I repeat again, this is by far the most lore-heavy weapon in the game, and it's been given to Retribution Paladins. So what's all the fuss? Well, as Slayer, a prominent member of the Paladin community, particularly Protection these days, has pointed out, the most powerful weapon in Warcraft history is being given to the only DPS class that never features in top 10 world kills of end of instance raid bosses, and hasn't done for some years now. And I agree with this as a lifelong Retribution Paladin that is absolutely delighted to be getting the Ashbringer. Unless they actually do something to pay attention to the performance of Retribution Paladins in raids, something they have not hitherto done, we are and will continue to be the red-headed stepchild of WoW. And even I have to agree that it will be a great shame to diminish the power of this weapon by giving it to a spec that some guilds will happily leave absent from their entire roster. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying Retribution has ever been weak. I have never felt weak. But the class is nonetheless not well represented. So on balance, maybe, given that so many of the artifacts have just been made up specifically for this expansion anyway, maybe it would have been better if all artifacts were just made up specifically for Legion. Now comes the next problem with artifacts, and one that affects far more of you. There are going to be catch-up mechanics for alts and other specs. Now this is fine for alts, but not for other specs, I would argue. For pure DPS classes, it will take extra work to keep up to date with another artifact, and they seemed pretty clear at BlizzCon that it would be a lot of extra work to maintain all your artifacts. Now this is bad news not only for pure DPS classes, but also their raid groups. They have finally binned dual specialization. They're allowing us to switch between all of our specs in Legion. But they're now also encouraging us only to play one spec. It's a lack of joined up thinking that will cause real problems. Now, one thing that already holds some DPS players back is not becoming expert in all of the specs they have available to them. For example, if you see yourself as a combat rogue, you're at a disadvantage on all fights for which assassination or subtlety will be better. Now, given that Blizzard have said they want to make all specs really distinct, this can only make the problem even more pronounced in Legion. Think about the difference between a guild who have players with all their artifacts up to date and one where only one is maintained. And that will make a massive difference to progress, even with all other things being the same. This is definitely a feature that could, and I think should, be changed. I'd encourage everyone to hassle Blizzard at every opportunity to highlight the problems of the intended system and to change it so that artifact power is granted to all artifacts equally. I think the only extra work in maintaining multiple artifacts should come from doing the quests at the start and from obtaining relics to power them up. But in all other respect, I really don't think it's fair to expect some players to go out and have to get like more artifact pay. I don't even know how that works. Because we don't know the full details of exactly how artifact power works for empowering your weapons, and we won't do until people are properly into beta, we are sort of guessing a little bit here. But the fact that Blizzard have said it would be more work to maintain all these artifacts is going to prove a problem, and it's going to be a little unfair on pure DPS classes. And yeah, I would absolutely voice my concern over this. I'd especially encourage those who are playing on US servers, because they actually read the US forums and respond to them, whereas we don't know they do that in any other region of the world. So that's what we know about artifacts so far, with the exception of a very few individual traits that have been revealed, screenshots and so on, but it's not really worth going over those here. It'll be fairly piecemeal, and the full list will become readily apparent as soon as people are invited into the closed beta and allowed to discuss features with the wider community. And as beta's only a few weeks away now, shouldn't have too much more of a wait. Okay, so hopefully this was instructive for those who don't know a lot about Artefacts at the moment, and we'll look forward to some more news coming out in the next month. See you later.